And welcome back to the Standard Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. We're talking about quarterbacks and tight end rankings. A little sneak peek at who the top 5 of each of ours are and why we like them where they're at. Again, we will be dropping in August our full-on rankings for everybody to have get ready for your fantasy football drafts out there. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe and click that notification button to get all the alerts when we drop our new episodes. So let's get into it. Our number one quarterback is unanimous amongst, I think, everybody out there, and that's Pat Mahomes.
Shocker.
It's hard to not be when you just consistently do what you do as a professional in your game. There's been no undulating performances from him at all. He has consistently put up massive numbers. I'd say there's one season where he played 14 games where he only had 26 touchdowns. But again, was still Offensive Player of the Year, I believe, that year. So you look at look what he does when you put up over 4,000 yards minimum in your career. Already have a 5,000 yard under your belt, a 50-yard touchdown, or 50 touchdown under your belt, and last year puts up 41 to win the MVP. So that being said, when you take all of that out under the books, he was not Offensive Player of the Year. He was actually 4th for Offensive Player of the Year that year. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong stat here.
Slow your roll.
Yeah, slow my roll. Pat Mahomes is going to give you at least 42 to 4,800 yards consistently in a season. And on top of that, he's going to get you touchdowns in the 30s. And it's tough to say that for every single quarterback. I mean, you look at Justin Herbert, who last year threw for over 4,700 yards, only had 25 touchdowns. Tom Brady threw for over 4,600 yards last year, only 25 touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers last year had a quote-unquote off-season, threw in the 20s himself. But Pat Mahomes, besides that injured year where he only played 14 games and didn't play the whole season, he has been in the 30s, upwards of 50, and last year in the 40s. I expect him to be in the 40s again this year. His game changed last year after Tyreek Hill left, and everybody was thinking, his touchdowns may go down, the yardage may go down, just because the sheer fact that he's not going to have these big bomb plays and these home run plays like he used to. The dude threw for the most yardage he's ever thrown for in a season, and he threw for 41 touchdowns. All doing that with a scrapbook of wide receivers and the number one tight end in fantasy football and arguably in the NFL. So that being said, I don't see anything different.
Not arguably.
Yeah. There's no big difference from last year to this year that's going to have me say, departure of Juju Smith-Schuster is going to tank his production and his output. In fact, they get people like Richie James, who was one of the best reception percentage leaders last year in the NFL. He's going to get he's got a rookie out there coming in, Rashee Rice. That's going to be a big body. He's still got
Sky Moore.
Development Sky Moore, exactly. And they re-signed Jerick McKinnon, who was a monster for him in the receiving game. So I just think at the end of the day, he's got just as many weapons last year as he does this year. And he's going to find himself getting close to 5,000 yards again. And I wouldn't be surprised if he goes over 40 touchdowns.
Yeah, I don't think weapons are the problem there. Like, I don't think – I agree with you. Like, he's consensus number one quarterback. And he's going to be again this season. I don't think weapons have been the problem there. Like, I don't care that he loses Tyreek Hill. I don't even care when if Kels decides to retire, I don't care. Like, he makes players around him better. Yeah. And it doesn't matter. And the weapons that they have, like, they're not – like Kadarius Toney, MVS, Juju last year, they're all good players. They're not elite, but they're all good players. And he can get great performances out of good players. And that's what kind of player Mahomes is. What I think is a bigger loss, even bigger than Tyreek Hill, is the loss of Eric Bieniemy. And I would be more cautionary against him if Andy Reid wasn't the coach. But because Andy Reid is the coach there, I don't really see this offense falling off because the offensive coordinator decided to leave for Washington for another offensive coordinator position, which doesn't make sense to me. Unless Ron Rivera is going to get kicked out the door and then he's going to be made the interim coach, you're still not the head coach.
I feel like that may have been the thought process in moving away from that too, because I think maybe in Kansas City he just didn't see, maybe even the higher ups of Kansas City didn't see him being the heir to Andy Reid. That's all.
He was probably sitting there for 3 years just feeding Andy Reid like laced hamburgers with fat, just trying to have him get a heart attack. Like, let me coach Mahomes. Let me be the head coach. No, but like it's hard to make any kind of argument against Mahomes. He's just so talented and he brings out the best in players. I don't care who's around there. It's Justin Watson catching the ball, Kadarius Toney. It doesn't matter how young these players are, unless they're just straight up dropping every throw. Like, he's going to put the ball on the money and he's going to find new ways to get the ball. And they're going to throw the ball like 45 times a game.
Yeah, so that's the biggest thing. That's going to go up big time.
And he still has Kels there. So even on the in-betweens, if he misses the big shot, they're going to move the chains with Kels. So it doesn't matter.
But here's my argument against the departure of your offensive coordinator with a guy like him. It almost is the same as Tom Brady, but you can even liken it to a starting pitcher going from one team to another in baseball. But when you got a guy that's that good, you think Roger Clemens, you think Nolan Ryan, you think these guys who are, arguably Hall of Fame guys that you sit there and they get into a new system and a new team, new pitching coaches, new coaching scheme, that it changes their game whatsoever. To me, Pat Mahomes and Tom Brady are two of these quarterbacks that you can talk to where your offensive mindset and the play calling shouldn't change their output. He runs that offense, Pat Mahomes does. He reads the defense, he runs the offense, he sees a play in front of him. He probably knows the whole playbook and could call the entire game if he really wanted to. Yeah, Ben-Ami is very smart, and Ben-Ami makes good decisions. I'm not saying that at all. But you look at Tom Brady going to another offense where there were, he had good weapons there. And all of a sudden he's, was it Leftwich that was there that was making the play calling?
In Tampa.
In Tampa? Yeah, Tampa.
Arians was, and then.
Well, Arians was the head coach, and then Leftwich was the offensive coordinator. But they can still do whatever they do, whoever's calling the plays. The only time I've seen it really affect a quarterback in the last couple of years, in my opinion, the biggest one was last year with Justin Herbert, where they just completely took the game out of his hands, and the play calling was so awful in terms of passing and in terms of downfield passing attack that it really did hinder. He still threw for 4,700 yards, but
also every year with Dallas.
Yeah, but you did. Well, that being said, is that Dallas or is that Dak? And I could argue it's Dak, but
Dallas. But then the Chargers just got Kellen Moore, so
Yeah, but anyway, back to Pat Mahomes. He's unanimous number one.
I'm going to kind of stop you really quick, just because I really don't agree with what you just said, because I don't think Mahomes is that kind of quarterback. I think play calling is not in his repertoire. I think he has been working within the offense. Like, he does a lot of things creatively, but he is not Peyton Manning. He is not Tom Brady. He is not making audibles on the field and calling the when you had Brady and you had Peyton in the league and Drew Brees, they were able to look at a defense and call their own plays for it. And they knew exactly what to do. Mahomes is not that. I think Mahomes is very much what this offense is they scheme up things on this and have fun doing it. He's a backyard football kind of player.
That's what I was about to say, backyard football player.
More so than like I know what they're trying to run against me. And because we saw the first year in the league, he took the league by storm, and we did see some kind of decline in his play once teams started to make him have to read the defense. And then the play calling was just so good that they were able to overcome that. Like, you can argue, like, Andy Reid has done this for years in Philadelphia when he had McNabb, and he did this for, he had Jeff Garcia, over there still producing because Andy Reid is a good offensive coach.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really agree with that. He is this kind of guy that you lose your offensive coordinator. I would say if Andy Reid wasn't the head coach there, I'd be more worried about this departure. But because Andy Reid's the head coach there, and if Andy Reid starts calling the plays again instead of Bieniemy, then they're going to be just fine, and Mahomes is just going to be fine. But the departure of an offensive coordinator, especially that with a younger quarterback that really hasn't elevated his game to be able to be that field marshal.
That's where we differ. That's where I differ. I feel like he's more of a field marshal now than he was in his first 3 seasons. But the past 3 seasons, and that includes sitting behind Alex Smith that first season, but his past 3 seasons, I think he has been more of a general on that offense. Yes, I mean, I think the play calling has been 100% in favor because I think Bieniemy is a great quarterback. And some people always argue that, well, Bieniemy's only a great quarterback or a great offensive coordinator because he has Pat Mahomes. But I don't think that's the case. I think he's a good offensive coordinator. Pat Mahomes, I think, to me, has stepped it up. I think he has taken it to another level. I think he does read the defenses. Maybe he's not Peyton Manning. He's not Drew Brees. But like, look at someone like Aaron Rodgers, who does read a good defense, but he had a decline when they had a coaching change too as well with the offensive coordinator. But that's because they took the ball out of his hands. Similar situation, like I said, to Justin Herbert. Like, you got to let these guys play a little bit of backyard football, so to say, for them to be successful. It's not as to the point of Lamar Jackson, which is, severe backyard football. I mean, just, get the ball and do whatever you want. But I think at the end of the day, he's got the brain on him, and he's got the ability to make plays here. I think, there's a reason why he's the number 1 quarterback for both of us. But I just think I'm not afraid of the change in coordinator. And, the whole point of Andy Reid being there, regardless of that fact, like, there probably would be a decline in the whole team with the loss of Andy Reid, because that's a big morale loss. But I think Pat Mahomes is going to lead. You could put him on any team in the NFL, and he's going to lead that team and be a successful quarterback. Just, I think with the Kansas City Chiefs, they have a great thing going as a full-on locker room and team situation.
Well, I think post-snap, he's probably one of the best. He is the best quarterback in the league post-snap. Pre-snap, I don't know if he's there yet. Like, we just haven't seen enough of it because the offensive scheme has been so good. The kind of misdirection that they use, and that's still going to be there with Andy Reid. So this is why I'm not worried. Here's the
biggest thing too is the confidence, and he knows his receivers, and he knows his tight end, and he knows his running backs. And you just look at the sheer fact of that one playoff game, where Travis Kelce sits there and he's calling for the ball in the last second to get down the field to kick a field goal, and Kelce recognizes something in the defense based on the route he ran and goes right back to Mahomes. And Mahomes has the trust in his guys to get something done like that, especially in Kelce, that I think they just work together in a different way than some of these other guys are. He doesn't have the guys on his team sitting there barking for the ball consistently, because he knows that they don't know they're going to get the ball, and they know they're going to get themselves an opportunity, and he's going to give it to them. So
right.
We don't have to say anything more about Pat Mahomes. If you have anybody else above Pat Mahomes in your rankings, you got to reevaluate what you're doing when you wake up every morning. Because
also drop in the comment, place a little comment on the video to let us know why you think that. Why do you think that a quarterback is better than him?
Yeah. I mean, here looking at our at number 2 here, again, number 2 for both of us is across the board the same, and that's Josh Allen. Now, Josh Allen, to me, he's more of a two-way quarterback in terms of his rushing ability and his cannon of an arm. So he doesn't rely on just the passing. So in my opinion, and we'll get into this in a second, is that he has the opportunity to fall out of the number 2 as well. But also, I wouldn't say he has the ability to jump above Pat Mahomes at number 1, maybe in overall fantasy because of that rushing ability and rushing touchdowns. But because of that too, he has an opportunity with his arm, with the running game, for injury and to get himself out of that number 2 spot. But his talent is undeniable. But before we jump into him, let's take a quick break. When we get back, we'll be talking about Josh Allen, our number 2 quarterback in the rankings. All right, and we're back here. So we're on our number 2 quarterback for our top 5 fantasy rankings, and we're at Josh Allen. Let me know your thoughts on him and why you have him as your number 2, because I'm high on him. But like I said a little bit before we took the break, there's a chance he could slip out of this number 2 position in terms of overall fantasy finish.
Yeah, I mean, I have him as number 2 because I just think his running potential matched with his throwing potential is something like we haven't seen before. Yeah, Lamar Jackson is a better runner and has more yards. We know that, but he's not throwing for 4,500, yards in a season,
No.
and he doesn't have Stephon Diggs. This offense is solely around Josh Allen. The running backs aren't heavily involved. They don't get volume work. They don't get goal line touches. I mean, you look, he has last year had over 700 yards rushing, had 7 rushing touchdowns, had 35 passing touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
His touchdown, and so his total touchdowns is up at 42. He had more. I mean, I actually don't know. I think Mahomes had some rushing touchdowns, but he's number 2 in total touchdowns in terms of quarterbacks. But passing yardage, it's there. It's a deep down the field passing offense. Now, I know there's a lot of knock on him and how he has some regression and how last year we saw the interceptions go up and the offense is not going to be as good as it was, but the offense is still good. He's still a big body mobile running quarterback, so he's not going to get hurt. Like, guy lowers his shoulders into people and runs people over.
Mm-hmm.
So I love him here. Like, if I don't get Mahomes, I'm not super excited with drafting like a high end quarterback. But he's definitely my number 2. Like, if he's off the board or if another guy goes in front of him and he's still sitting there and there starts to be a run, like, he's going to be a guy I like to grab. He can win you weeks.
Yeah. Well,
Simple
I
as
mean,
that.
over 550 attempts last year. It was almost 100 less attempts from the year before, but closer to his 2020 numbers. But when you look at it, like you said, the guy rushed for 700 yards the past 2 seasons. He's thrown for 4,200 yards or more the past 2 seasons. He's thrown for at least 35 touchdowns the past 3 seasons. He has thrown for 10 to 14 interceptions the past 3 seasons, but that comes with the volume too as well. So you got to understand that when his interception percentage was no higher than 2.5% in terms of his attempts. So that's pretty low. I mean, you don't want to see you get much higher than 2.5, but that's pretty low. I mean, when you look at people like Pat Mahomes, the elite one there, his interception percentage was 1.9, but the year before he had a 2.01. So to me, Josh Allen's right up there. His rushing ability is what separates him from Pat Mahomes. He did have second most touchdowns. I think he had 42 total touchdowns. Mahomes had 45 because he did have 4 rushing. And touchdowns matter. The passing volume is going to be tough to get himself over 500 yards if he's going to go for rush for 700. But if there ever is a change in that at any single point, and he goes for a little bit more passing from rushing, you are going to see a decrease in those numbers because of those 10 rushing yards equal 1 point versus 25 passing. But again, the only reason I see him dropping out of here is in decrease in his yardage for passing and his decrease in rushing. And really it was a decrease in rushing. And you get somebody like Lamar Jackson who comes in here and rushes for more, or somebody like Joe Burrow who throws for 5,000 yards in a season, if that were to happen. That's the only way I see him slipping out of number 2. Even Jalen Hurts, if he ups his passing yardage close to the 4,000 mark and keeps his rushing in that other mark and gets himself closer to what Allen was, that's the only one. But again, I think it's a small margin that's going to happen. I think Allen solidified himself as the number 2 for the past 3 seasons. Behind Mahomes, and I think he belongs there. I think there's no doubt in my mind that, hey, listen, if you're in the back end of the draft and you like Allen over Mahomes, you're not in a bad part to take him at that 2 swing early. I know it's not your favorite way of doing it, and if you watched our mock drafts earlier, I did that with Mahomes, take a quarterback early, and my team, I think, ended up being pretty sort of even across the board, had some good highlights and some big highs and not many lows. You do miss out on some of the big players, but you lock in. These 2 guys are the 2 quarterbacks that can get themselves massive points compared to the other guys.
Well, I think that there are 3 guys that have the potential to be in that number 2 spot behind Mahomes. And it's Allen, Hurts, who happens to be my number 3, and Lamar Jackson, who's not in my top 5. But those are the only three that have that ability, and that's because they all have high rushing upside.
Yeah.
Even Burrow and Herbert, they're going to have ridiculous seasons, and they have the weapons to do it.
I wouldn't say ridiculous. I wouldn't say ridiculous.
Well, they would. Well, all right. Well, let's look at their top end seasons versus the average season from Mahomes. I'm saying to get into that Mahomes category.
Well, here's the perfect example. So look at Mahomes in 2020. He had 4,700 yards, passing, 38 touchdowns. Last year, Joe Burrow had 4,500 yards and 36 passing touchdowns and 12 interceptions. I think that year Mahomes only had 6 interceptions, which is insane to me too. But Jet put Joe Burrow as quarterback 3 in scoring last year with 429 points. There were only 4 quarterbacks that scored over 400 points in fantasy football last year. And that left Geno Smith in the 5 spot with 363. 422 was Jalen Hurts. That's a massive, that's a 60-point differential in quarterbacks, which is huge in my opinion. So that's the reason is Burrow at 429, Allen at 468, Mahomes at 498. And Hurts was at 422. When I say if Hurts got himself up over 1,000 yards and, got his passing touchdowns up
Hurts didn't play for the final 3 games of the season.
Exactly. But I'm saying like that to me, that's the argument I can make is Burrow or Hurts, one of those guys can, if there's a down year in Allen at all, like a little bit of down year where he only throws for 4,000 and he doesn't rush, he only rushes for, 450 or 500. Like one of these guys can get up. And it's the rushing part that I think will knock him down out of the 2nd spot. But you're right. There's not many people that you can put right behind Pat Mahomes comfortably. And like I just named the 4 guys that went over 400 points last year, and nobody else was within 60 points. Geno Smith was the closest. So let's move on to our number 3. If you feel different about Josh Allen, like we said about Mahomes, leave a note in the comments here and what your thoughts are and where you would have him. But when looking at our rankings, our number 3, we kind of differ. I've got Joe Burrow as my number 3. You've got as your number 4. You've got Hurts as your number 3. I've got him as my number 4. So they're neck and neck. Let's talk about Burrow first, and then we'll move on to Hurts. Sure. To me, I have Burrow. Burrow finished as number 3 last year in fantasy. The guy has gotten better year after year. He continues to throw around that 70% completion percentage, which is fantastic. His completions went up last year along with his attempts, but the yardage did change last year. He threw for 4,600 yards the year before. I think that in part was due to the injuries last year to Jamar Chase. I think with a healthy Jamar Chase, he could have got himself closer up to the 4,800 yards, with Chase getting another 400 yards under his belt. So that's my opinion. I think you see 34 and 35 consecutive touchdown seasons for Joe Burrow. I think he sticks with at least 35 this year. He gets up closer to the 5,000 mark, around 47, 4,800. And he only had 12 interceptions last year. I think the interceptions go down too as well, or stay around the same. You could see him getting up near that 450 point season, at 460 point season that Josh Allen had, just purely through the air. Now let's not knock the fact that he did rush for 259 yards, not like 370 he did the year before, but he did rush for a good amount of yardage, 257, and he had 5 touchdowns on the ground himself. So he is, coming off that ACL injury the year before. He only had 118 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he got more comfortable on the ground, just like he was at LSU with his rushing ability. I think he's going to still see 4 to 6 touchdowns on the ground, probably around 300 yards max there too as well. So I again, the rushing numbers aren't Josh Allen. That's why I don't see him above Josh Allen. But I think he is a prolific passer in the NFL.
Jalen Hurts is why I don't, and that's why I don't have him above Jalen Hurts. And
I agree with you. And I'll let you talk about Burrow and transition to Hurts.
I'll talk about Burrow first
in a second, but the reason I have Hurts underneath them is Hurts is somebody who I think has a regression and doesn't continue. And that's just my opinion on it. So tell me what your thoughts are on Burrow.
I agree with you in the rushing too, but I think the opposite's going to happen, where his passing is going to increase. Well, we'll talk about him in just a second. We'll finish up talking about Burrow. So Yeah, I mean Burrow is my number 4, and I haven't bought, that high because of what he can do, the weapons around him. That's a complete offense, right?
Hmm.
They have everyone around him. They have 3 really good receivers. They have a good tight end. They have a good running back. Their offensive line is getting better and better. Um, but he still gets sacked a lot. He still gets hit a lot. He's
Yeah.
the most sacked, or I think the top 3 most sacked quarterback in the last 3 seasons. Um, so he's going to get hit a lot, but they're going to throw the ball a lot. And they're in a division where they're going to have to kind of shoot out some points. And I think that might be overall the most competitive division in football. I think all 4 teams are going to be good. Um, that being said, I do think that there's going to be more game management. And the one knock on Joe Burrow I'll say is it's hard to put him in my 2-3 spot with only 300 yards rushing. And I get he has some rushing touchdowns with that and goal line rushing touchdowns. That's fine. And it's good to see, a non-mobile quarterback get those kind of rushing touchdowns. But when you have guys that can run for almost 1,000 yards at the quarterback position, like Jalen Hurts, it's really, really hard to put someone else in front of them. And I think the weapons are the same on the outside. So I think overall they're really equal with AJ Brown and Devonta Smith versus T Higgins and Jamar Chase. I think the Eagles have a better tight end, but
Burrow's got a better wide receiver 3.
yes. So I think that there's a lot of weapons around him. We like the offense. So if you like the offense, you like the quarterback for that offense.
Mm-hmm.
Burrow's an elite talent. He's an elite thrower. And you're right. He's improving every year. You saw the numbers that he threw up last year. He's going to be around that 4,500 yards passing. Again, I think, and unless he can break 40 touchdowns passing, I don't see him going into my top 3. Because I want total touchdowns there for my.
But here's the thing: total touchdowns last year for Jalen Hurts was only 35. Same number of passing touchdowns that Burrow threw last year.
He ran for over 800 yards.
No, he only ran for 700 and where's the rushing? 760 yards last year. So he had 13 rushing touchdowns, and that's where I see that's why I have him one step below. I'm not saying it's going to be a massive regression. I just don't see him getting 13 on the ground again. I'm not saying the yardage is going to go down. I think he'll still be in the 650, 700 range again, and maybe he'll cap 700 again. But
for me, if it wasn't for Jalen Hurts getting hurt at the end of last year, Joe Burrow wouldn't have been in the top 3. He would have been number 4. They're 20 points off.
Quite possibly so. We don't know that, but yeah, quite possibly so. It's that 2 game difference. That's a 1 game worth of points at least for Jalen Hurts, for him to tie that, and then 1 more game to beat it. I'm not saying that. That's why I have him neck and neck. I just have Burrow above him, and I just have Burrow above him because I just like the consistency, and I know the outcome, and I don't have to rely on legs and rushing yardage and injury concern from that one. Just because of what he does to the air. But Hurts is a talent nonetheless, and he's done it for 2 years in a row now. He's done for over 760 yards 2 years in a row rushing, double-digit touchdowns on the ground rushing each year, and his passing has gotten better, especially with the emergence of A.J. Brown to the team, increased himself not only in yardage but completion percentage by a whole 5 points, which is huge in passing. When you're talking about over almost 900 attempts, when you get your completion percentage up 5 points between those 2 years on 900 attempts overall, I think is huge. And that increases touchdowns by 6 in the passing game too as well. So yeah, he belongs right in that 3-4 range 100%. And I think the only reason
consideration too on what the Eagles were last year. I mean, like you saw
a juggernaut.
Like they would get up 3 scores early in the game and then run the ball down your throat and kill the game. Like how many times I had Jalen Hurts last year, and how many times did he have 20 points in the first half and then only score 5 or 6 points in the second half?
Yeah, it's true.
Because
it's true.
They would just coast out the games. And I don't think it's necessarily going to be that same thing this year. I think that they lost 2 safeties. So the top end coverage, the rest of the defense is still good. Like teams aren't going to be able to run the football on them. And we'll talk about in season, like sit your studs against the Eagles at running back, because they are a juggernaut there.
That's
But
all they've done was just find ways to stop the run.
yeah, but you can pick on them in the deep balls, and I think they're going to have to throw the ball a little bit more this year. I think Miles Sanders got 250 touches last year. I think they're going to manage carries for Swift and for Penny, and for Jalen Hurts. I think his numbers are going to regress rushing, but I think his passing totals are going to go up. They're going to be
they should.
They're going to be in a lot more games, and you can't say you don't like the weapons around him. I mean, even adding DeAndre Swift, right? He's a great pass catcher out of the backfield. So adding that into the repertoire and the late season breakout of oh my God, why am I blanking on his name?
What position?
The running back.
Miles Sanders or Rashad Penny?
No.
Swift?
No. Oh my God.
Kenneth Walker? Or Kenny? Not Kenneth Walker.
Kenneth Gainwell.
Kenneth Gainwell.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a Kenny.
I am so sorry, guys.
It was a Kenny.
I just had a cup of coffee too, and that's embarrassing.
I need a coffee.
But yeah, I need it. Yeah, but even the late season emergence of Kenneth Gainwell, and we saw him being involved in the passing game a little bit more out of the backfield. I think that this offense is going to be more pass heavy, and we can see those numbers. Yeah, he didn't throw for a lot, but he was efficient when he threw the ball, and he was accurate downfield. We saw in the Super Bowl what he can do throwing the ball downfield.
Mm-hmm.
We know what kind of runner he is. We know he's going to get the rushing touchdowns. They scheme runs for him, so even if they don't give him the volume and running the football like they did last year, he's going to be able to take that. If they give it to him, if the defense gives it to him, he's going to be able to break off a 20-30 yard run easily. I don't see his rushing numbers dipping down below 600 yards.
Okay.
So,
well, let's just say for talking sake, you say it goes around 600 yards. He's down to 160 let's say 16 points loss in the rushing, right? And you get that back 160 yards in the passing game, and just equivalent wise, it's only 3 points. Or sorry, is it 3 points? No, 4, 5, 6 points total. So it's a 10-point differential, and it just gets bigger of a gap in between there. And that's my only concern. Is like he may not need to run as much as he did last year. He may not need to, and if he doesn't need to, he's got to pick it up in the passing game for me really to see the pay dividends in where you're going to be taking a quarterback like this. Which is why I knocked him a spot. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I can understand that argument. He didn't throw for 4,000 yards. He was almost 300 yards away from that, and his passing touchdown totals was fairly low. He only threw for 22 touchdowns. I think that number goes up, though. I think that this offense, I think, is going to be a little bit more potent in the pass. We saw that he's efficient in passing the football. So I don't think it's a stretch to say he throws for 8 more touchdowns and gets to that 30 mark. And if he gets to that 30 mark on the touchdowns, then he's going to have, with his rushing ability and how they run him on the goal line, he's going to have at least 10 touchdowns rushing.
Yeah,
So
well, that's what you're drafting
touchdowns.
for. That's what you're drafting for. You're drafting for
Right.
double-digit rushing touchdowns, and that's
Right.
what it is. So if you see him increasing in the passing game, and you're getting the volume out of the rushing game you're going to, he can easily be right neck and neck with Josh Allen. There's no doubt about it. You just got to believe that he's ready to make that jump.
Really close.
He's going to make that jump.
Close.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're talking about 700 passing yards difference. I mean, that's huge. But again, like you said, Miles Sanders had a fantastic season last year. If that running game doesn't produce the way it's going to produce, someone's going to have to rush that ball, and they're going to have to start passing the ball. And so, yeah, you can see that value jump. I think he has the biggest, in terms of the top 5 guys, him and our next guy that we're both unanimous on, have the biggest range of outcome. They have a high ceiling. Their floor is not low, but low for the top 5 is what I would say. And that's our number 5 that we're unanimous on is Justin Herbert, a guy who last year, to me, got shortchanged by offensive coordinator and head coach, where you look at the year prior to, he throws for 5,000 yards and 38 touchdowns. How do you let a guy who's got an arm and a cannon, who's thrown for over 30 touchdowns 2 years in a row, at least 4,300 yards, and come into the next season, change your game up so much that he throws for 4,700 yards, which is a ton, but 25 touchdowns? Like, you dropped 13 touchdowns through the air from the previous year. You go from a 5.7 touchdown percentage to a 3.6, and his interceptions went down. Even though people knock him on his picks, it was 10 picks. But to me, I just find that so wild. And it wasn't like, I tried to break down the numbers more. Like, he had 256 first downs 2 years ago. He had 228 the previous year. It wasn't like it was a massive differential. You just saw a difference in, it looked like yards per attempt went down by almost a full yard. Air yards per attempt almost by a full yard. They just decided to dink and dunk, and they last year were the team that aggravated me the most, not only because I had him on my team, but to watch a guy who needs 6 yards for a first down and they're throwing the ball 3. You know, it's like that type of team last year where it's like they had the opportunities to push these games and win more games and really make themselves a formidable opponent in the NFL. Yet they found ways to just make themselves smaller in terms of playing the game.
Their playoff game is a perfect example of what their season was last year. Mm-hmm. Like, what they need is Robert Saleh as their head coach, all gas, no brakes. Like, you get a 27-point lead on someone, freaking crush them. Like, yeah. put your foot on the throat and finish the game. And that's what we saw a lot out of the Chargers, is that they would get a lead and not finish the game because their play calling would just switch up to being safe. And they're playing the game against the clock more than they're playing the game against the opponent. Put points on the board. And that hurts your fantasy stats. Now,
hurts your quarterback more than anything. In that
this is my knock on them. Like, I like Justin Herbert. I liked what he's done, but they get Kellen Moore, who we've said the same thing about the offensive struggles in Dallas for a couple of years now, as Kellen Moore is the offensive coordinator there. And now they get Kellen Moore as your coach. I don't know if things are going to change too much. I still value him just because of potential and what the team is. Like, your number 1 running back is the best pass catching running back in the NFL. You have 3 legit wide receivers that 2 of them are big, tall, and deep route receivers with Mike Williams and Quentin Johnson. Mm-hmm. And then Keenan Allen is the ultimate possession receiver. And then Gerald Everett at tight end. They have all the weapons in the world to be successful. Yeah, Herbert should be throwing for 50 touchdowns every year with this kind of.
He's got the potential to do it.
The problem is too that, like, their receivers haven't stayed healthy.
Yeah,
like, they haven't had a full season in like 3 years where they haven't had receivers out for multiple weeks. You saw Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Donald Parham, like, everyone went down last year. And so Keenan Allen's throwing to.
You mean Herbert's throwing to?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Justin Herbert. Man, I'm brain farting today.
Justin Herbert's throwing to Carter and Everett like crazy, and, like, you know, pretty much guys who are afterthoughts. I agree with you.
So, you know, if the receivers stay healthy, I mean, that's the whole reason they go on and draft Quentin Johnson, is because, like, their top end receivers can't stay healthy. So you get a guy that's 6'3" and 225 that runs a 4.5 40. That's Mike Williams. That's a replica of Mike Williams. So just throw him in there and he'll be able to catch the deep ball for you.
But here's my whole thing about the Kellen Moore, though, is if you look at Dak Prescott's 2 full seasons from 2019 to last year, it was 2019 and 2021. I can't remember when Kellen Moore came into that offense after what's his name left. But 2019, Dak Prescott threw for almost 600 attempts, 4,900 yards, 30 touchdowns. Okay. 2021, 596 attempts, 4,500 yards, 37 touchdowns. Like, he had 2 great seasons, and that was with Zeke, still getting double-digit touchdowns, and he was probably 1,000 yards in 2019. I got to look back at the stats there. But they had a good running game, good offensive line. The offensive line is beefed up in L.A., and on top of that, you can argue that LA's receiving core is better than Dallas's full receiver core in any of the past 5 years, any of the years that Dak was there, to be honest with you. Because the sheer fact is you've got 3 wide receivers right off the bat that are studs. You got a great receiving running back out the backfield and solid tight ends. Like, yeah, that may be the only thing that Dallas had better.
I'd maybe argue that when Dak had Cooper and CeeDee Lamb's rookie year and Michael Gallup and Dalton Schultz.
It's close, but what I'm saying is Kellen Moore is not working with nothing here. Kellen Moore didn't value the pass. It wasn't like he valued only the run game there. Like, he knew what he had in the offense, and the fact that he was able to produce like almost 600 attempts in 2 of those seasons with Dak Prescott. To me, Justin Herbert is a better quarterback than Dak Prescott, just naturally talented in the passing game. So I just think, to me, that's why I'm going to say it now. I'll let you continue on Herbert, but Herbert is my dart throw, my bold take for the season that he finishes MVP in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, what I was going to say about my comparison for the coaching change was that Kellen Moore will just that offense found ways to lose games, and it's not much different than what they had last season. So yeah, offensive numbers should go up. It's why I have him as my number 5. I think he has all the potential in the world and the people around him to throw for 50 touchdowns, to throw for 5,000 yards. He has that potential. He has that ability, and he has the talent around him to do that. It's going to be and listen, they're going to have to be in shootouts with Kansas City. They're going to have 2 teams in their division. I mean, listen, Denver's defense is actually really good. And so I don't know if he's going to have huge passing games. So even though the team might not be good, like, Denver's defense is very good. But the Raiders, I mean, they're Swiss cheese back there, and you just throw wherever you want. But yeah, that's why I have him there, is that he has potential and have the people around him to be a top 5 quarterback. And I think that there are guys around the next kind of grouping of quarterbacks. The guys right after the 6, 7, 8 guys that I have, all have the potential to be in the number 5 too, but they just don't have the weapons around him that Herbert does.
Yeah.
And I think just for that alone is why he's my number 5.
Well, and here's the thing is if you gave Herbert 10 more touchdowns, and put him up to 35, which I think is very reasonable. I mean, the fact that Joe Burrow can get 36, Herbert should be able to get 36. But you put him at 35 last year. That would have put him literally up at quarterback 5 on the season. Just no additional yardage, no additional rushing yardage, no additional rushing touchdowns, just 10 touchdowns to his passing game, which is very feasible for him to do. And on par with Joe Burrow, I think he puts himself at the top 5. And like you said, the growth is going to be there. There's a pathway to see 5,050. There's a path to that. Yeah. And the biggest thing for me, the path to that, is the fact that you have one of the best receiving running backs in the NFL on top of that. And they treated that completely differently too as well than they did years prior. And I just see a huge jump, because if they're going to win, like you said, they need to keep the foot on the throat and not take their foot off the gas here. Because if they do that, then you're going to see games where, like, Justin Herbert has a chance to, if I go to his game logs here, chance to throw multiple games over the 400-yard mark consistently, because of just the fact that, especially against Kansas City, but some of the other teams they play, they're not going to, get up 21-0 and all of a sudden start to coast. I mean, last year he had zero.
Las Vegas Swiss cheeses.
Yeah, he had 0 games over 400 yards last year. 0. And there were games where he had like 200 plus at the half easily, and they just coasted.
Let's not forget he was injured last year.
I agree. Like, the rib injury did hinder some stuff,
and a lot of the play calling could have been to try to protect him. They had leads in games, and they're just trying to protect him. They kind of played this dink and dunk
But I think that affected more of his rushing than anything, because his rushing numbers were cut in half, and he had none inside the red zone. That's for sure.
And again, you look at Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and how that hurt him last year, and that's the big play touchdown ability. There was a lot of plays, and I remember watching last year where they had drop balls that were, that they had the shot, bombs the ball 50 yards, and the receiver just drops it, and they're in tight coverage, but Mike Williams might make that catch. Keenan Allen might make that catch.
He'll be open, make that catch. I agree. When they came back after injuries, they did show that big play ability. It just, I don't know. I just think the potential's there. You agree with me. I agree with him. He's number 5 in our books for a reason, outside of Lamar Jackson, and the other guys that are on this.
Number 5 in our books and number 5 in our hearts.
What's crazy, some people have Justin Fields up above him, and Lamar Jackson way above him. And I just think those 2 quarterbacks alone, they have the rushing potentials that this guy doesn't have. It's just the volatility.
Those guys are my next 3.
Yeah, but just the volatility in those guys can be so big, but it can be such a big drop-off if they don't give you what you need on the ground. Where Herbert himself never relies on the ground game, which hinders his game. However, if he gets back up to the 250, he can. The 250, 300 yards for the season, which is low for these rushing quarterbacks. But if he can do that and put 3 or 4 rushing touchdowns under his belt too, that even pads his stats even more. So that's our top 5 here. We're going to take a quick break before we jump into the tight ends. Again, if you have any thoughts on our top 5 quarterbacks, put a drop in the comments. Let me know what you think. All right, welcome back into our episode where we talk about our top 5 quarterbacks and top 5 tight ends in a little sneak peek to our overall rankings here. We're going to get into the tight end section. Again, if you have any thoughts and comments on our rankings here today, feel free to leave a comment so that we can go back and forth and give you our reasoning why a little bit more, or we'd love to hear your reasoning why. Maybe you'll change one of our minds a little bit. That being said, we're going to go over to the unanimous number 1 overall tight end in everybody's books, and that's Travis Kelce. We don't have to stay a long time here because we know what we're getting out of it. We're getting a wide receiver in a tight end position. There's nobody else on this list that can consistently do what he does. People have done it before, but not consistently. And that's why we have him ranked at number 1. When you look at it from a year after year standpoint, he is Pat Mahomes' favorite target in terms of overall targets. His yardage may be below the top receiving yards for the team, but it's usually up there. For the past, since 2016, he's gone over 1,000 yards. In fact, he's only dipped down under 1,100 yards one time. He has consistently gone from, since 2017, over 8 touchdowns all but 1 year, as high as 12, which was last year as well. He's got a fantastic catch percentage as well. So when you look at a guy like this that's consistently catching the ball for a career 71%, he's a guaranteed go-to solid receiver. I can't even call him a tight end for his quarterback. So to me, he is the only tight end that you should be looking for in the first round if you're looking to take one that early. And I could argue in the first 2 rounds.
I don't think that there's much we need to say about Travis Kelce. Here's what I'll say. If you don't have him as your number 1 ranked tight end, I want to know why. Please leave a comment and just I want to hear from you. I want to know why you think. I've heard some things about how he's going to regress and his touchdown. Stop. Just stop. He is friends with Mahomes. They his usage. Yeah, they took him off the field. He's a red zone target, a huge red zone target for Kansas City on a very, very potent offense. He's the number 1 receiver on that team. So the same reason you like Justin Jefferson or Cooper Kupp or any of these top end receivers, how can you not like him? So I don't think that we can throw stats at you all day, but if you're not taking, if he's not your number 1 tight end on the board, you're probably not winning championships.
I mean, just here, we'll leave you with one little stat for people who want to argue anything. He outperformed most of the wide receivers last year. He finished with the 3rd most receptions in the NFL, period. If that doesn't tell you enough. 3rd most receptions, period. That's not tight ends. That's all receiving stats. So let's move on to our number 2, which both you and I have the same as well, and this is before it gets a little funky. But we've got Mark Andrews both at the number 2. In fact, that being said, Mark Andrews is all dependent upon Lamar Jackson and that offense there. So it could go one way, could go another. We're talking about a guy who consistently was going from 700 to 850 yards, except for one blow up year in 2021 where he had 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns. You have a difference in Baltimore with a little bit more receivers there with Odell Beckham. You've got Zay Flowers, the new rookie, and Rashad Bateman, hopefully for a full healthy season. So Jackson's going to have some other options, but they're also supposed to start throwing the ball a little bit more there. And if there's one person that I know Jackson's going to be comfortable with, and he's shown it through his tenure in Baltimore, and that's Mark Andrews. The guy is tried and true in the red zone. After that 2018 rookie season, he has not gone below 7 touchdowns in a season, which is great for a tight end. So it's realistic to see him get close to that 1,000-yard mark again here, and I expect him to be anywhere around 7 or 8 total touchdowns on the season, bringing him in at your tight end number 2.
Yeah, even in games that Lamar Jackson was injured, he was very consistent. Like, he's a big body target. I think having more receiving options there, especially having quality receiving options, not just one. Like, they have Odell Beckham, they have Rashad Bateman, they brought in Zay Flowers. It's going to take attention of the coverage, of the defensive coverage. And we're talking like the back end safeties. So Mark Andrews is a mismatch for any linebacker in the league. And if the safety has to respect the speed of the Odell Beckham and Rashad Bateman, it's going to open up more for Andrews. And I think that Andrews being a favorite target, the one thing I'll say about Andrews I think we're going to see kind of an emergence of a 2 tight end system. I really like Blake Likely this year as kind of a sleeper tight end. If anything happened to Mark Andrews, he is going to be an elite option. Mm-hmm. But the consistency of Mark Andrews is just something you can't ignore. And it's way more consistent than TJ Hawkinson or George Kittle or any of the other guys in the top 5. His numbers have always been up there, and he is the favorite target of Lamar Jackson. If Lamar Jackson is going to be, and the Baltimore Ravens are going to be successful, Mark Andrews needs to be successful. And
Correct.
Having a tight end that scores 7+ touchdowns a season is something that you want from a top end tight end. And like I said, we've talked about this before, where there's Kels and then just a mile of everything else, and then there's Mark Andrews, right? It's not this comparison of like Mark Andrews has the potential to be like the number 1. No, it's Kels is going to be the number 1, and then it's who is going to finish as the top guys after that. And what you're looking for from these quote unquote elite tight ends is consistency. You want guys that you can play every week instead of having to stream tight end, which there's an option there too. If you feel more comfortable doing that, you go right ahead. Like, there's a lot of deeper options that you can go do that with. But if we're talking about our rankings and what we see from the top 5 guys, that's what we want. We want guys in the top 5 that we can plug and play every week. Like, it's set it and forget it. And yeah, they're gonna the tight end position as a whole, they're gonna let you down from week in and week out. Like, they're gonna have some really good weeks, and then they're gonna have some subpar, sub 5 weeks. Travis Kelce had that last year, and so it's just the nature of the position. But Mark Andrews has been really consistent over the last couple of years when he's been healthy on putting up solid numbers from the tight end position. That's what you're looking for from a number 2 tight end. I think second round is a little too rich for me, but in the third round, if Kels is there, and that's the kind of strategy I've been looking for, is to solidify.
You mean the Andrews?
Tight end. Sorry, well, no,
Andrews.
Kels is the number 1 off my board.
Yeah, but you're saying third round. If Andrews is too rich for the second round.
Yeah. If Andrews is still there, it's a little too rich for the second round is a little too rich for me for Andrews. But in the third round, if he's there and that's the strategy I'm looking for, then yeah, I would go and take him in the third round to solidify that position.
I agree with you there too. And here's just a couple little nuggets to chew on. Is he has been a top 5 or better tight end the past 4 seasons. In fact, he was in 2021. He was the number 1 tight end. Barely the number 1 tight end, but Travis Kelce's season last year would have beat that number 1 tight end in 21. Here's the hard part, though, And this is right before we jump out of Andrews and start talking about where we differ in this, and the reason why I put a little bit more onus on these numbers, which gave me to the rankings I have, is the fact that there seems to be a benchmark number out there of 140 points for tight ends. For you to go, if you go to 140 points or more, you're an elite tight end in the in fantasy, but in the NFL too, in terms of your usage on your team. Mark Andrews done it 2 times out of his 5 years. I mean, you could throw away his rookie season. He only started 3 games. So that being said, you look at Mark Andrews on the other games, he literally has hit 140, 112, 194, 117 last year. That's why I have him as number 2. Now, the next guy at number 3 has done that as well. He's hit that 140 mark in one season and has the potential to do it every single season if he can stay healthy. And that's why I have George Kittle at number 3. Now, where you differ is you've got TJ Hawkinson at number 3.
I think Kittle at 4.
You have Kittle at 4. No, I actually have Hawkinson at 5, and I could talk about it when we start talking about Hawkinson. So we'll start talking about Kittle. And that being said, George Kittle has been a centerpiece and a constant for that offense before they got Christian McCaffrey last season. But that being said, you've had a carousel of receivers in and out of the San Francisco offense, but the one constant since 2017 has been George Kittle. The guy's had 2 seasons over 1,000 yards. He had, in 2021, almost had over 1,000 yards. He had 11 touchdowns last year in 15 games and 765 yards. The guy's an elite pass catcher. His yards after the catch are what make him very special compared to Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews. Like, he does a lot with the ball after he gets it in his hands. And that's why I have him at my number 3. I just think he has supplanted himself as a better receiver, a number 2 option, if not quote unquote number 1 option, but number 2 option for the San Francisco 49ers. He had only 86 targets and 60 receptions last year in 15 games. He had 94 and 71 the previous year in Debo's big blow-up year. I still think he's going to find himself upwards of 100 targets again, and receptions up near the 70s, and that's going to give him, wide receiver 3 status with the potential to break into the number 2 in the season, even with somebody not Jimmy G throwing him the ball. And we saw that last year. So I like him a lot. Give me your thoughts on Kittle alone and why you have him with somebody else above him, and you can start talking about Hawkinson.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, let me start by saying Kittle might be my favorite player in the NFL. I love him. I had him his rookie year. I had him actually the first 3 years that he was in the league.
Yes.
Let me say this for Kittle last year. All right. Because he did have 11 touchdowns, you said?
11 touchdowns on 60 receptions.
So 7 of those touchdowns came in the last 4 weeks of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And 7 of those touchdowns came with
Brock Purdy.
With Brock Purdy.
Mm-hmm.
If Brock Purdy is the starter, Kittle could be the number 1. If Brock Purdy is the starter the entire season. Because the way that offense ran with Purdy is exactly what Kittle is made to do. They run the play action so well and attack the middle of the field. And you're absolutely right. His ability to after the catch is what separates him from every other tight end in the league. Now, I love Kelce. I think he's a dynamic receiver, but he is not making the kind of plays that George Kittle is.
No.
George Kittle might be the best tight end in football overall, not fantasy, just overall, because he can pass block, he can run block, he can catch, he can run routes, he can catch out, and he can break tackles and have yards after the catch. But if Purdy's not the quarterback, if they have to start the first 6 weeks or 4 weeks with Trey Lance or with Sam Darnold, I don't know. I mean, it takes a big hit on his draft stock, but you're going to get Kittle at more of a steal in the 4th or 5th round. Kittle's a guy that I would take. I would probably take at the back end of the 3rd round into the 4th round if he's available. I do have Hawkinson over him, just because I'm not sure on if Purdy's going to come back, and again what that is going to look like. Teams now have a full offseason to kind of scheme for that offense, and I don't know. There's question marks with that. With who's going to be quarterback there, and excuse me, what the offense is going to look like, at least for the first couple weeks of the season.
But you don't see that even with say Sam Darnold projected to be the starter right now over Trey Lance. You don't see Sam Darnold having a rapport with George Kittle, probably the most veteran guy next to McCaffrey there.
No, I think they're going to play it safe.
That is safe to me, though. I feel like Kittle is a safe play.
No, I mean, like they're going to listen. I don't necessarily think that he's just going to disappear in games, but
yeah.
You saw that. I don't see the kind of numbers that he was putting up at the end of last season. Like with Purdy, in what 3 of the 6 games that Purdy started, Kittle had 2 touchdowns. Half of the games that Purdy started during the regular season, Kittle had 2 touchdowns.
But he also had, in week 10, he had 4 catches, 84 yards, 2 touchdowns. In week 6, he had 8 catches on 10 targets, 83 yards. He had a 6 for 98 and a touchdown. Like, he wasn't forgotten about the rest of the season. There were some really bad games, for sure. There were. Yeah. But I also think the emergence of Christian McCaffrey helped him more than anything too. So I think it's a twofold, which is why I like him at my number 3. Is it's just he is a consistent, solid guy. I'm not saying Hawkinson's bad by any means. I'm just saying
it's really close. Like they were really, really close in terms of that ranking, and I can be swayed one way or the other. They're my 3-4. Let me just say that. So whether I have Kittle above Hawkinson or Hawkinson above Kittle, the reason I like Hawkinson over Kittle is I think because Justin Jefferson, there's going to be so much. We talked about it earlier when we talked about Justin Jefferson. There's a lot of other playmakers there on that offense, so it's going to be hard to scheme. And if you have coverage that's moving over, we saw when he was traded over to the Vikings, what kind of usage that he got, and he went from being like an elite talent, just in an offense that didn't utilize tight ends, to a team that utilized their tight ends and had an elite talent there. And so I thought that Hawkinson, when he was on the Vikings last year, really started to produce consistently. And that's kind of what we've been hoping for since he was drafted by the Detroit Lions. We just never saw it because that team just doesn't like to use tight ends. Same reason I didn't like Sam Laporta this year. Even though he's an elite pass-catching tight end, they don't use him. So I don't care that he's really good because we saw it from Hawkinson. So listen, I like Hawkinson in that offense, and I kind of like that. I like the passing offense better. I think San Francisco is a better offense as a whole. I think the passing offense is better in Minnesota, which is why I like Hawkinson a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have Hawkinson as my number 5, and this is my only reasoning. Is again, when I'm talking about tight ends who have the potential to go over that 140 range or who have actually done it in their careers, what I would say, there's only been 4 of them in the active tight ends right now, and Hawkinson is not one of them. Hawkinson last year had 129 points in fantasy football, best season by far. It's his first time breaking into the top 5 finisher in fantasy. He had a top 6 finish in 2020, I believe it was. But here's the stat that had me taken aback a little bit. Like, volume is what he may get, but again, I see Jordan Addison helping take away a little bit of that volume where they used him last year because I think Thielen was kind of on the way out, where now you get another youthful player in there. But last year in Detroit, he played 7 games and started all 7. He played 10 games for Minnesota and only started 7. So let's just take those 2 sample sizes. He went from having 15.2 yards per reception in Detroit to 8.7. He went from having he had 3 touchdowns in both the teams there in 7 games. He also went down from a 56.4 yards per game with Detroit down to 51.9 yards per game with Minnesota. If it wasn't for that 120-yard, 2-touchdown game I think he had at the end of the season, his numbers in Minnesota would have been shadowed by his numbers in Detroit. So I think he was used downfield differently in Detroit, and he's not used as downfield as much in Minnesota. And I think it's going to stay that way. And that's where touchdowns are going to matter for him in Minnesota. Volume is going to matter for him in Minnesota if you're going to see him get back into that top 5. And I'm not saying he's not going to be there. I just foresee some 3 wide receiver sets. KJ Osborne's talented. They drafted Jordan Addison the first round for a reason. And yeah, Hockenson was a first-round tight end. Don't get me wrong. He's a talented guy. I have him as my number 5 tight end, so he's still top 5 for me. I just don't see him getting up to that 140-point mark. That's my benchmark, like I said, for the elite top tight ends.
Let me say this for Hockenson, okay? So I would say that Minnesota lost their 2 most significant red zone players, Adam Thielen and Dalvin Cook.
Mm-hmm. I could agree with you that.
We already said, when we talked about the wide receivers, that Justin Jefferson is not a red zone threat. He is not targeted in the red zone significantly compared to other players on that team. So if we think that there's a vacancy on red zone targets, do we think that KJ Osborne is going to take that? Or do we think that Jordan Addison is going to take that? Or will we see an uptick in a bigger body guy like TJ Hockenson who can be effective in the red zone? That's where I think that the potential is. And that's where I think that you're going to see an uptick in red zone targets because they're not going to run the football as much, or they're not going to use Dalvin Cook out of the backfield. And they don't have Adam Thielen who can have double-digit touchdowns just because of red zone targets. Yeah. So I think that Hawkinson's numbers, at least the touchdowns-wise, goes up, which would bring him into that 140 range. 2 touchdowns brings him into that 140 range.
Well, I mean, here's the only thing I will say is looking at the stats here, and I don't know for they don't have him down for some reason as Minnesota. That's interesting. I'd have to look in Detroit real quick. But last year, TJ Hockenson total season had 20 targets inside the 20, but let's talk about inside 15 where it really matters where you get your touchdowns. He had 16 targets, and in terms of Minnesota, in terms of wide receivers, where are wide receivers here? Wide receiver wise, Jefferson had 21 targets and Adam Thielen at 15. So that's 15 targets being vacated by Thielen. KJ Osborne did have 8 targets, but you're right. And that was as a wide receiver 3. So I think there's 15 vacated targets in terms of red zone opportunities. And then when you look at Dalvin Cook, receiving wise in the red zone, he had 8 targets as well. So it wasn't a high sample size for Cook in terms of that, but the rushing portion of it inside the 15 is high. I do agree. There's going to be opportunities in the red zone, and that's where he does thrive. But like I said, and I'll go back to the one last stat here, and we'll move on to our number 4, because he's my number 5.
You talked about Kittle.
Oh, you're right, Kittle. So my number 4. But is last year.
Our number 5.
It wasn't only that his yards per reception went down when he moved to Minnesota, but it was also his yards per target went down as well. Like there were just a lot of stats that went down in terms of that it's going to be a volume thing for him and it's going to be a touchdown thing for him. Pure and simple, which is why, to me, I just didn't like it as much at the number 3 spot, but I have him in my top 5 regardless. He's still in the top 5. That being said, my number 4 is not even in your top 5.
No.
And that's Darren Waller. And I'll talk, and you'll see the full rankings list to see where Chris ranks him, but I'm going to make my case here for Waller at number 4. When we're talking about that 140 number in terms of points for fantasy football, Waller hit 171 points in his best season. Right? Now, injuries have been his issue. And injuries aside, it's hard to argue that this guy is not going to be the most targeted player in that Giants offense. He is a tight end by title and by position, but he's not a tight end by his play on the field. And that's how I expect the Giants to use him, because they didn't go out and they didn't draft one of those top wide receivers in the draft this year. They didn't go get somebody in the first round. In fact, in the offseason, they bring in They sign a couple guys to a couple small contracts that have been constants for them in terms of Darius Slayton and Isaiah Hodgins. So you look at Waller in 2019 and 2020, in the 2 seasons where he pretty much played a full season, he had 16 games and then 15 games. He was able to produce over 1,100 yards, and one of the seasons had 9 touchdowns. Now you look at it, he even had yards per reception of 12 or more in the past since 2018. That's hard to find on a tight end side outside of Gronkowski, who holds like some ridiculous stat. I think it's like 15 yards per reception or something like that in his career. So that's where you are drafting Darren Waller in your 4th ranked position, like I would, based on what his potential could be. He had last year 9 games, only 6 starts. He only had 43 targets. 11 games, 11 starts in 2021 for the Raiders. But everybody wants to think that 2020 was a very far season away, and it's not. And now he's in a new regime, a new offense. They're going to get crafty.
It is when you can't stay healthy. And the last 2 seasons, he had great numbers in 2020. But
yes.
The last 2 seasons, he hasn't been healthy. And so, potential-wise, he's there. It's the same thing. It's the same argument for Lamar Jackson from the quarterback position. Lamar Jackson has no business being outside of anyone's top 5, except for the fact that every year he can't stay healthy.
Correct.
And so talent is going to drop you down when you're only getting half of the games of the season. So no one I think is arguing any talent on Darren Waller.
But here's my argument to that is, so you got to take away 2015, 2016. He obviously missed 2017. He wasn't even in the league, and then he came back in 2018 again, and that's when he was a wide receiver. When they moved to the tight end in 2019 is where he kind of emerged and became who we know as Darren Waller. So from 2019 to 2022, he had 2 full seasons, and then the past 2 seasons missed a significant amount of games. He played 11 games in 2021. So he only missed 5 games. And then last year is when he missed the significant. But I also think the Raiders just didn't put him in. I think that was another issue. I think they were trying to ship him off to somebody too in midseason. But that being said, you're not making the same argument for Saquon Barkley, not being a top running back. People try to make that argument, and then he comes back and he does what Saquon Barkley does in a full healthy season, under a new regime. You make the same argument for anybody with injury history. He's only had 2 consecutive years of somewhat injuries. Somewhat. I just don't see, in my mind, I don't see him not coming out.
Games, though, when you miss 6 games, so that's essentially, I don't know. I probably wouldn't go and draft Darren Waller. He's not in my top 5. But I probably would stay he's kind of, if I don't get the top 7, I'm probably gonna go and grab 2 guys that are later. But if I draft, so let me say this, he's probably my 7th ranked tight end right now. I'm drafting someone else. Yeah. I would go and draft probably a couple rounds later Njoku or Everett or someone else that's going to be consistent, because when he inevitably gets hurt, then you're going to be out and trying to pick up scraps on the tight end waiver wire. So do yourself a favor, when any of these guys that have injury concern, or you might have concern about with injury, go ahead and draft another middle range guy, because and do yourself a favor, because if and when he gets hurt, you're going to be wasting a 4th round draft pick on a guy that's only going to give you 8 games in a season.
But here's the only thing I got to say. He's only done that one time. He missed 5 games in 2020 or whatever it was, or 6 games or whatever it may have been. But or 2021. All I have to say though at the end of the day is, if you have a guy that you can draft as a game-changing player, and especially at the tight end position where you talked about, you have Travis Kelce, a whole lot of nothing, then Mark Andrews, and you've got only a couple people right around Mark Andrews that have ever done what Mark Andrews has done, and that's literally Andrews, Kittle, and Waller are the only 3 active tight ends that have gone over 140 points in a season for fantasy football. Okay? You put yourself at an advantage. Again, yes, if he stays healthy, but I'm ranking him and I'm basing him on health, because he's only shown me in a year and change of not being healthy. Not necessarily multiple years like everybody's expecting this to be. As a tight end, he has had 2 consecutive first 2 seasons as a tight end for the Raiders, he was healthy and a stud. And then he had one season where, he missed 5 or 6 games. And then last year, he only played in 6 games. I'm not, last year to me is the anomaly. I'm saying going into this year for the New York Giants.
In the last 2 seasons, he's missed an entire season.
Yes. But you could say the same thing about Saquon Barkley 3 seasons ago with the ACL injury and the sprained ankle and all this. And then he comes back and
Even
he puts
with the sprained ankle, though, he missed 3 games and then came back. That's not Waller missing 11 games from multiple injuries, too.
No, the year after his ACL, he came back and he had an ankle injury after that. Mm-hmm. And I think he missed maybe 4 games or something, Saquon. Like, he missed plenty of time, too, as well. And yet, the talent is there. And you can't draft people based on, I'm not going to draft him because he's going to get injured. You don't know injury status. Like, you can see the past 2 seasons he's had injuries.
Here's my argument against that is you're comparing it to a running back position. And the running back position, you're when you get one of those high-end guys, we're talking about 140 points. In the fourth, if you're evaluating him at a 4th or 5th round draft pick, even a 5th or a 6th round draft pick, the running backs and wide receivers that you can get there and let someone else deal with that and go and get a tight end on another 2 rounds and get him in the 8th round, I'd rather do that. If the difference between Darren Waller getting 140 points and Dallas Goedert getting me 120 or Dalton Schultz giving me 120 where I can get Dalton Schultz in the 9th or 10th round, I don't care about the 20 points there. I'm going to make it up because I'm going to be able to draft a higher end wide receiver or running back. Like, I'd go get a middle range quarterback. I'd rather do that than go and get one of these, these question. For me, he's a question mark at tight end because I'm not disagreeing with you. If he stays healthy, this dude is super uber talented.
Yeah.
To be completely honest, I don't even know why the Giants signed him. Like, I really like Bellinger there. I really don't.
I do know why. I do know why is because they're going to do 2 tight end sets very often, and they're going to use Darren Waller in the slot. They're going to use Darren Waller out wide. He is not going to be used like a tight end, which is why I'm saying
Kenny Golladay.
No, Kenny Golladay. He's more than a Kenny Golladay.
Tight end of Kenny Golladay.
No, they did because Kenny Golladay was a contested catch guy, and I thought that was the worst signing ever, especially what they paid him.
Yeah.
If they got him for half, I still would have said it was a terrible signing because he just didn't have what it takes to be that X receiver. He's not a Calvin Johnson, and Detroit realized that soon, and we're happy to get rid of him. Here's in my opinion with Darren Waller is he's going to be used very differently than the other tight ends on this list to me because of just the weapons around him automatically put him in a pseudo wide receiver 1 position, and Bellinger's going to be there and get his too as well. But there's going to be 2 tight end sets. You're going to see more of like a Gronkowski roll out of him, the way they used him in New England, than I feel like you're going to see Darren Waller was used in Las Vegas. So that's why I have him as number 4. Is
I think that's best case scenario.
Yeah, but I think there's no other scenario that you see out of that. They're not going to sign him and pay him if he's not going to be that. That's the thing. So again, I'm not saying my number 4.
Kenny Golladay.
Yeah, well, no, that was Dave Gettleman. You got to understand, there's a whole new front office there.
I get that. I get that. There's other receivers here too. So I agree with you. I think that there is going to be some volume there. Like, I still have him ranked in my 7th ranked wide receiver or tight end.
I think it's a reasonable ranking for him because where he could finish. I think he has a range from 2 to 7.
I don't drop him off too far on that, but it's just
we're not talking about missed games from Kittle though either. Kittle has played 1 full season, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I mean, but Kittle, when they're Kittle's in there and they're healthy, they produce. Kittle's had only 1 season of in double-digit touchdowns. So is Waller. I mean but again, when they're in there and they get targets and they get highlighted and featured, they produce. And I think you're going to see both Kittle and Waller take a step up amongst the rest of the tight ends and be featured.
Yeah.
So, let's move on to
favor and go in the 1st round and draft Travis Kelce.
Yeah. Just like, if you really want to give yourself
situation.
Yeah. If you could see the discrepancy we have in here, there's even more when you're trying to figure out who you want to draft. That being said, outside of Travis Kelce, you take your shot on the tight end you want, or you wait and you take on the potential of a young guy or a guy in a new system. Because like these Wallers, these Kittles, these Hawkinsons, unless they fall and you get them at value, like Chris said, there are running backs and there are wide receivers that are in their ADP range that probably have better value on your offense and will give you more points over the course of a season and feel better about starting on a weekly basis. Like your Tyler Lockett's, like your Chris Godwin's, guys like that are going to be there. Yeah. Well, even Rachaad White's farther down. I mean, you could take Rachaad White off these other guys that are farther down. But
James Conner, like there's tons of guys down there. Like again, that's the argument is like, would you rather have a guy like that on your team in your flex or get Darren Waller in your tight end? Like,
but I'm going to say if Darren Waller's sitting for you in the 6th round, I'm taking Darren Waller in the 6th round because that means I got 5 rounds of volume. That means I got my 2 starters at running back, or so you could say. That
means you missed out on the top 4 guys.
Yeah, right? and it also means that you probably don't have a quarterback too either. So it's like you want to try and win at a position.
We talked about it in the mock drafts when I drafted in the 4th round and I drafted TJ Hawkinson. He's the end of my 4th, like the top 4. And after the top 4, I think that there's a significant drop off on value. And I probably wouldn't have drafted a tight end probably until the 8th or 9th round. If I didn't get Hawkinson there, I probably wouldn't have touched a tight end till much, much later. But
speaking of Hawkinson, you have him as your number 3. I have him as my number 5. Your number 5 isn't even on my list, and I don't have him quite fully in a position where I feel I've been going back and forth whether I like him at 8 or whether I like him at 9 or even 10. But he's in my top 10, and that's Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, I don't think I can't see how he can be that far down. Now I'll say he's been hurt too. I like this offense a heck of a lot better, and this is consistent with my quarterbacks too. Is I think that there's going to be a big jump in Jalen Hurts and the passing game for the Philadelphia Eagles, and if I think that he's going to take a big jump and the passing game is going to take a big jump, then my opinion is that all the players around him, that goes for Devonta Smith, that goes for A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert, all those guys are going to take a big jump. And we've kind of talked about it as like the number 3, Quez Watkins, is not the number 3 wide receiver there or pass catcher is Dallas Goedert. It is Dallas. And so even the argument you want to make against TJ Hawkinson is like they have Jordan Addison and KJ Osborne and Justin Jefferson. Yeah, you can argue that he's the 3rd or 4th pass catcher there. Like Goddard's number 3. And he has 2 elite guys above him. So he's going to be forgotten about. We've seen Ertz be successful in that offense. We've seen Goddard be successful when he's healthy there in that offense. And that's the reason I put him there at my number 5. And like I said, it's kind of, that 5 down is kind of a jumble of a bunch of like people. I don't think you'll see a consensus like unanimous ranking for all those guys. It's going to be opinion. I mean, like I've seen Kyle Pitts up there. I've seen Dalton Schultz up there. I've seen tons. I've seen the Chig up there, which that I don't get. I don't like. I can't take a Tennessee Titans pass catcher in my top 15 in any position.
That's purely somebody basing it off of just a small sample size.
He's the Alberto of last year.
Potential. Yeah.
He's the Alberto of last year. When everyone was all, Alberto is going to be the top 5 tight end. Nope.
Listen, Dallas Goedert, I will say, is consistent. He has hit that 86-point mark a couple times, 70 on 11 games. 2021 was his best season, had 109 fantasy points in standard scoring. He did see a drop in his yards per catch last year. He only saw a drop in 1 touchdown, but he's consistently scoring 3 touchdowns in a season. But he did see a drop in yards per catch by 2 whole yards, which is pretty significant. And I think that's just the emergence of A.J. Brown. His targets, over the course of 12 games compared to 15 the year before, were around the same. He had the same amount of receptions. So I just think at the end of the day, for me with Goedert, and why I have him as my number 8, I would say right now on my ranking, is just because I don't see him becoming 1,000-yard tight end. I don't see him getting above maybe 5 touchdowns on the season. Whereas I see someone like Kyle Pitts at 6 can do that. I see someone like Njoku I think he could be the number 2 option in Cleveland, even with Elijah Moore there. I think he still is a freak athlete, but him and Goddard I have back and forth. And then I obviously, like I said, Waller, Kittle, Hawkinson, Andrews, Kels, all those guys can go for 1,000 on their respective teams.
I can make an argument that Njoku is the number 5 receiving option.
You could, but I also could make the argument he's a number 2. That's what I'm saying. It's like I have Goddard at 8, but I could also drop Goddard down. I just think it's one of those things.
Again, we're talking about like pathways to success, right? So like Kyle Pitts, I can see kind of being up there because pathways to success there's Drake London and then there's him, right, as pass catchers. But they're like they're the bottom 3 team in terms of passing offense in the league. So how do you like anyone there? And Pitts only has 1 touchdown.
Yeah, see, that's why I have him at 6 and not top 5. If that guy was putting up 5-6 touchdowns a season, he's 100% inside your top 5 because of just pure volume and the route tree he runs is just scary.
Right. So Goddard being the number 3 in that offense, I can make an argument for Evan Engram being, like, you saw what he did the second half of last season, towards the end of the last season, that he can be in that top 5. I think he's a legitimate threat to be in that top 5 argument. But guys like Pat Freiermuth, who really haven't shown anything, and they bring in Allen Robinson and they have Deontay Johnson, and like, how much offense do you think that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to have?
No, I agree with you.
People are evaluating Pat Freiermuth as being like that Kenny Pickett is going to throw for 4,500 yards and everyone on that offense is going to feed. Like Pat Freiermuth is a number 4 receiving option on that team, and he's not even a heavy red zone guy. Like I get it. He had 5 or 6 touchdowns last season, so he does get some touchdown volume. I just don't see it as a pathway to success in a team that's going to be very mediocre. At least not the team itself, but the fantasy statistics, they're going to be very mediocre all the way around. I think that you're going to see a lot of there's not going to be a heavy volume player like Deontay Johnson is going to get his. George Pickens is going to get his. I think Allen Robinson is going to be effective there. I think Freiermuth is going to be effective, but I have him ranked as my 8th tight end.
I actually have him as my 10th tight end because I said the same thing. You still bring in a rookie, Darnell Washington. I mean, let's close up on our top 5 here because I really want us to finish up with Goddard. To me, and this is the last point I'll make, is not a knock on Goddard. It's just that when you get to tight ends 6 through 10, even 6 through 11, because you got to throw someone like Njoku, Schultz, Ingram, Goddard, Pitts, Freiermuth, like those guys there. It is a crapshoot. You could move the needle on either one of them and make an argument for one to be more than the other, etc. Right. So, in my opinion, that's why we talk about is it worth taking a guy inside that range? If value's there, yeah. Like you're talking about, if some one of these guys falls to the 10th or 11th round, and you're sitting there looking at Evan Ingram, or you're looking at David Njoku or Dalton Schultz, and you're like, I don't have a tight end yet. This guy's here in the 11th round. Are you kidding me? Because people are fading tight ends because everybody wants the top and then not. That's the time to take them. But if you're looking to get a tight end and you're taking the number 7 tight end, which is not equivalent to the number 7 quarterback, number 7 running back, or number 7 wide receiver, and you're taking them in the 6th round, you're setting yourself up to handcuff yourself a little bit because of the value that you're passing up on in running back, wide receiver, and quarterback in that 6th round.
Yeah, I mean, you're better, like we kind of said it before, like you're better off in the 8th, 9th round because like 2 of these guys are going to be available. Like go back-to-back picks and just pick 2 of them. And get, there's nothing wrong with getting Pat Freiermuth and David Njoku or Dalton Schultz and Evan Engram. Like you'll have matchup plays and you're going to be probably really well off at the tight end position if you hit even 60% of the time on making the right decision between those 2. You might throw up equal numbers to Mark Andrews at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of how I would do it is if I'm not getting Kels or Andrews or Hawkinson or Kittle, and I want one of these other guys that are in the middle, like anyone immediately after that, from 5 until 10. I'm probably going to grab 2 of those guys, and I can wait on that. I don't care what 2, because I think that it's going to be insignificant, the difference of statistics between Darren Waller and Evan Engram. I think it's going to be inconsequential. So there might be 30 points off, 40 points off. Like, that doesn't make a difference to me. So if I can get Darren Waller and Dalton Schultz, or I can get David Njoku and Pat Freiermuth, I'm going to be set up for the season on making good plays. I'll roster 2 tight ends the whole season.
I mean, just food for thought for everybody out there. Top 6 scored over 100 points. I mean, you had Travis Kelce at 200. Then you had Taysom Hill at 140, which, again, I am never going to draft him. I'm never going to want him on. The only time I'm taking him on my team is because I don't want to lose to him for somebody else having him on his roster. You just can't trust him. He had these blow-up weeks, and that's about it. But George Kittle, 140. Hawkinson, 129. Andrews, 117. He missed some games. And then Ingram, 103. There wasn't another 100-scoring tight end there. But you could put Cole Kmet in there. You could put Jawan Johnson, who had 92. Like, these guys, they're all going to give you weeks. And I don't necessarily agree with Chris in drafting 2 tight ends, because I'd like to keep my roster filled with actual value that I know I could plug and play in a flex position at that. But that being said, if you have flex tight end, go ahead. If you don't have flex tight end and you want to go 2 tight ends, you can go Dallas Goedert, you can go Dalton Schultz, and then you can swing back around even a little bit later and take a chance on Mike Gesicki in a new home. You could take a chance on Chig Okonkwo unless somebody jumps up crazy to go get him.
They will.
Like, to me, these are guys that have opportunity, like Greg Dulcich, like another one that is going to be either drafted early because people are on the hype train, or he's going to fall down there outside and you're able to get 2 of the guys for your team that are going to do it. But to me, if I'm with Chris, if I'm not taking one of the top 4 or 5 guys in there, I am going to fade tight end till towards the end. And last year I drafted one. I think I drafted Dawson Knox. I ended up dropping him and picked up David Njoku and Gerald Everett. And I just flip-flopped them on a week-by-week basis, and it got me to the championship.
That's kind of my argument against, like, kind of what you did, right? You picked up you got lucky and picked up both those guys off the waiver wire, right?
Yeah, I think they were 12th and 13th, or 13th and 14th at the end of the season, tight end wise.
Right, like, so why wouldn't you draft both of them later if you can get them in the 13th?
Well, it's harder. The reason is it's harder to hit on 2 tight ends in a draft like that. It's easier to see what they're performing after a few games and spend the money on them. Or spend the money on one than it is to try and hit on 2 tight end. I mean, you know how hard it is to hit on a tight end, period.
Yeah.
So why try and take a chance on 2 when you can use one of those spots? I'd rather take a chance. I'd rather take a chance on a rookie on a new team,
right,
like someone like Quentin Johnston, than taking a tight end at that same round. And 2 tight ends.
Tight end in the 14th round.
Yeah, take a chance on that guy, because you can always hit unless you're in a league that has multiple tight end starting positions like flexes or anything like that. Not many people are going to carry multiple tight ends either throughout the season, because they don't want to take up bench spots. So there's going to be somebody on the waivers that if you don't hit on your tight end that you liked late in the draft, there's somebody of equal or better value that's on the waiver still. So that's why I say I don't like to draft 2, is because I don't want to miss on 2. I'd rather miss on 1 and go pay for 1 than miss on 2. And now I missed out on a guy like Quentin Johnston or Zay Flowers or one of these rookies that, for example, Zeus White over at in the Raiders. If he goes late in the draft because there's a holdout with what's his name? Josh Jacobs. Then all of a sudden Jacobs decide, I'm not going to play. I'm not going to play. Now Zeus, Zamir White. Zeus is what they called him at Georgia. Now you got yourself a solid running back that you wasted a tight end spot on that's sitting on your bench. That's my only thought behind it.
He doesn't look Greek to me.
Anyway, guys, thank you, ladies and gents, for tuning in. I know it was a little bit long-winded for the tight ends, but I know a lot of questions coming in the tight ends, and obviously Chris and I don't agree on everything, but that's a good thing because you hear from both sides of us. So like and subscribe if you like the content. Again, click that notification button so you see every time we drop our content for you guys. Leave a comment what your thoughts are. If you think I'm wildly crazy to have Darren Waller as my number 4, tell me. I want to hear it. Drag me through the dirt.
Tell us your strategies at tight end. Like, tell us what you guys do that that you guys have seen works in the past without drafting Kels, because it's drafting Kels and then like we said, just a mile of crap. So tell us what you've done in the past to make yourself successful at the tight end position, because I think that's a really hot topic for everyone to talk about.
Exactly. And keep an eye out. We have a fun episode coming up here where we got a couple of our league mates back, same ones you've seen in mock drafts and earlier in watching the NFL Draft Live. We'll be back doing a nice fantasy roundtable, kind of answering some questions from viewers and also answering questions that come here every single season that we may help answer prior to your drafts. Tune in next time, guys. Thank you.